Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
Todd, I have to tell you, this is a day that I knew would come. And somehow, in the back of my mind, I really hoped that by some miracle it wouldn't.
You're scaring us, Craig. You're scaring us.
But I know. Well, I mean, I don't think that this will come as a shock to anybody. Sadly, we ended 2021, which was a rough year anyway, but we ended it by losing just the incomparable, amazing, brilliant Betty White.
Just an American icon.
I think she's a global icon at this point, and for so many reasons. Really, probably the longest spanning career of just about any figure in entertainment, period, ever. Groundbreaking in so many ways, really broke through the glass ceiling for women throughout her career. She started in radio. Then when TV happened, she was right there. And early in her career, she was doing live on-air television for 5 hours a day, 6 days a week.
It's nuts.
Unscripted live television, 5 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, it's almost unfathomable. Nobody does that. I can't think of anybody today who could do that with comfort and success.
Not outside of the Home Shopping Network.
Right. And just went on to have an amazing career, primarily as an actress, but also as a producer, host of her own self-titled show. Very early on, before women were doing such things, when she had her own show, the Betty White Show, talk/variety type show, she had complete creative control, which again was almost unheard of. She hired female writers and producers. At one point, she had an African-American performer on her show, a regular on her show. He was a dancer, and she got all kinds of criticism. Networks and television stations, particularly in the South, threatened to pull airings of her show, and her response was, too bad. Deal with it. And in response, instead of taking this performer, I don't have his name in front of me, I apologize, but instead of reducing his role or taking him off altogether, she gave him more screen time in response and faced some backlash for it. Went on to do, amazing television. She worked with Carol Burnett. She really, I think, made a name for herself on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where she played kind of a vixen. Sue Ellen Nevins, I think, was her name on that show. Then what I fell in love with her through was The Golden Girls.
Yeah.
The Golden Girls was this sitcom about four elderly women. Our perception of age has changed so dramatically because
we're older.
When this show premiered, these women were in their 50s. There are shows about women in their 50s today that look very different than the Golden Girls.
That is so true.
But the Golden Girls, I mean, it was hilarious. I came home from school every day and from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock watched the Golden Girls in syndication.
Wow.
Every day after school for years. I still watch that show. It's hilarious.
It is.
It broke ground in many ways. It dealt with gay marriage and interracial relationships. And these women, they were older and they were widowed or divorced, but they still had active social, romantic, and sexual lives. It was the kind of thing that television had never seen before, and it was wildly popular. And after that, she continued to work. She worked in film. Lake Placid, by the way.
Is the movie. We'll get to it eventually.
Yeah. I believe this was her only horror film. It came out in 1999. And she had done some film work before, but this, I think, really kind of reinvigorated her film career, and she went on to do dozens more films throughout her career. She continued to work in TV. There was a huge online campaign to get her to host Saturday Night Live, which she did, and she was just brilliant on it. And the people who work on Saturday Night Live said that she was just one of the most gracious and talented hosts that they had ever worked with. I think it was Seth Meyers who said that in all his years on Saturday Night Live, she was one of, if not the only host who stayed for the after party and stayed for the whole thing. And she was probably in her 90s at that point. And he said that she ordered a hot dog and a vodka. And she just stayed and spoke to everybody who wanted to talk to her. And by all accounts, she was just a lovely person. And in addition to her work in the entertainment industry, which is groundbreaking and substantial, she was just a wonderful human being. She was charitable and kind, and she was an amazing advocate for animals. She was a lover of all animals and worked extensively with PETA and countless other animal charities. And in the wake of her death, there was a Betty White challenge to donate to animal rescues and humane societies, and millions of dollars were generated in her name. And I almost get choked up talking about her just because she is so cemented in my brain. I have such admiration for her. It's such a bitter irony that she passed just days before her 100th birthday.
That's crazy, right?
And, there was a huge tribute planned for her on her 100th birthday, which they went ahead with. And there are more tributes in the works. And if anybody deserves them, it's her. And as sad as it is that she's gone, what an amazing legacy. Like, you just can't help but celebrate that legacy. We're so lucky to have had her. I could go on all day.
I mean, I don't think any of this is hyperbole, really.
No.
We tend to pile on, and look at all just the good things about people when they pass, especially famous people that touch us in some way. But she's pretty unique. I would consider her like the great uniter, Like, there's nobody who doesn't love this woman, I think.
Right.
I mean, she just...
There's something wrong with you if you don't.
Really, and it's true. And it's not because she just slunk around and was kind of in the background and didn't really speak her mind, or just, smiled and nodded and agreed with everything. She was her own person. As a kid growing up, most of my experience with Betty White, certainly my first experience with Betty White, was, I guess, the same as yours on the Golden Girls, right? Also loved that show. Everybody loved that show. It was funny. You're right. It was groundbreaking. And her character on that show was interesting, Rose, right? Because she, I read about this. I read that when they were putting the show together and they approached her and asked her if she would like to play this character, she initially refused, because the way she read it, she thought this was written and going to be written as kind of a dumb woman, kind of a naive, stupid, kind of dumb woman, and she didn't want to play that way. But they persuaded her, and she said, okay, but we're not going to play it that way. And what kind of comes out of Golden Girls, you realize, is, she's kind of a little naive. She's kind of a little simpler in her thoughts and stuff, but she's not dumb.
No.
She's a very interesting, complicated character. I mean, as complicated as you can get in a sitcom, right? You don't get terribly deep on a sitcom, but she didn't play it stupid. And I feel like that is sort of the reputation that she had for a whole generation of people, was this character, So here she is. She's playing this kind and nice, grandmotherly type person that just is sweet and maybe a little naive, but everybody's going to love her because of it. Obviously not who she was in real life, but when we see actors on the screen, we tend to imagine them with their roles, And I think this movie, Lake Placid, was one of the first roles she had where she surprised people. She surprised people who didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Because in this movie, she's like the opposite of that. She's this strong, foul-mouthed woman who curses and swears. And that in itself was charming. Whoa, here's the sweet Rose, Betty White. Like, we just always imagined she's this way, and would never imagine she would play this role where she curses and swears. And, it's silly, but it's true. People always talk about and I think this has been bandied about in the media as well, like, oh, your career's had such a resurgence, right? Oh, people are more interested in you now, and, you're all over the internet, and there are memes made about you and stuff. Don't you think that's great? And she would respond and say, I've been working like every day for most of my life since I was a young kid. Like, from her perspective, and really from the perspective of history, her career never stopped. It kept going. It just like
it spanned like 80 years.
Yeah, right. It just, our appreciation of her grew and deepened, I think. And I think then that is why she kind of stands the test of time. Really, she never got irrelevant.
No.
She was just always interesting and always fun and always there. That has been a source of comfort. What a nice role model, a person to look
absolutely.
up to. And her career bore that out. Her personal life bore that out. And we all loved her for it. And if anything, again, it feels like hyperbole, but if anything, like there's some hope for humanity at a time when we're all just kind of down on it right now, that there's a person like this that does exist, that almost everybody universally can agree, this is what a good person looks like.
Right.
This is something to aspire to, or at least this is something to admire.
And there are so many things to admire about her, and you're right, this movie was surprising, and it is so fun to see her in something like this, because just her... I think the air that she had about her, she just seemed very kind and friendly, and she was all of those things. To see her here, spewing profanities, they just roll off of her tongue, and it's just absolutely hilarious. She wasn't entirely unlike that either.
Right.
If you watch her in interviews, like late night talk show interviews, she's just sharp as a knife, like so witty and so funny. And she was not at all above cracking a raunchy joke or playing with innuendo. And if you see behind the scenes footage of her from The Golden Girls or Hot in Cleveland, there are great like behind the scene stuff that you can see about Hot in Cleveland outtakes on YouTube and stuff. And she did. I mean, she could she could cuss it up with the best of them, and did. But again, that's just something that's endearing.
Yeah.
It makes her feel real and
human.
She's not just a front. She's not just a character. She's a real person.
Someone you can relate to, someone that feels approachable.
One of the other things that I love about her, and I mean, it has really nothing to do with her career, but her love for her husband. She was married 3 times. Her first marriage was very short-lived, less than a year, I think, and her second marriage was brief as well, a couple of years. But then, through her extensive work in game shows, she met who would become her third husband, Alan Ludden, and they just had such a wonderful love story. He pursued her relentlessly, and she was reluctant. I'm saying this from memory, so I apologize if there are any incorrect things that I'm saying here, but I think that she was a little reluctant because he was something of a ladies' man, and she knew that. Also, they lived on opposite coasts, and neither of them wanted to relocate, so though he was pursuing her relentlessly, she held off for a very long time. But eventually he broke her down, and they were married, and it was just this wonderful... They were married for decades. He died, I think, in the late 80s, and she never remarried, and said that she was never interested in pursuing romantic relationships after the death of her husband. He was the love of her life. And she talked about how, as she was approaching 100 years of life, she said that she loved life, and that she would embrace life for as long as she could, but there was also always a part of her who was looking forward to being reunited with her husband. So when she passed, her assistant, who was very, very close to her, said that we can take comfort in the fact that she's reunited with the love of her life, which is just you need some heartwarming content in your life every once in a while.
Right. Especially on a horror podcast.
Right. And we will talk about this movie because it's a good movie and I want to talk about it. It's a good thing it's short because, man.
We're a quarter deep into our podcast time.
I know.
But it's okay because this is our, if you hadn't noticed it, Betty White tribute episode.
Yeah.
Well, the thing you can't deny, really, I think about this movie is, yes, she did have a long career. It spanned a lot of things. And so she never became irrelevant or off the scene and then suddenly popped in.
Right.
But she did kind of, for example, this movie, this was not an indie film, right? This is a big budget.
No.
Mainstream film, lots of stars, heavily promoted, released into a very interesting year for movies. But she was playing a character in here that most of us had never seen before.
Right.
And so it drew a lot of attention to her, and I think it was a joke for a lot of us. Like, even if maybe you didn't like this movie, you'd be like, but you won't believe this. Betty White is cursing up a storm in it, right? And I do think it marked a bit of a turning point for her career, where more people were aware of this side of her, and she could kind of capitalize on that a little bit, or people would ask her to do kind of a little more edgy stuff or be silly, mostly in comedies and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that has also been fun, I think, for those of us who grew up with Rose, and that's really the only way we knew her, to sort of see her do this as well. And it's very memeable stuff. And so I think with the resurgence of the internet, which likes to hyper-analyze everything and milk everything in pop culture for all it's worth, I feel like she did really thrive in this era where a lot of stars don't, in that she was very memeable, relatable kind of career that she had, in person. And so everybody just loves to love her. And so I do think that that's true. And this movie definitely was for sure a turning point in kind of bringing out that other aspect of her career, which it might have gone that way anyway. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, this movie, it's a giant crocodile movie, and it's funny because I was reading that the giant crocodile has less than 4 minutes of screen time. But, it's a crocodile movie, so in some ways, the crocodile's kind of the star of the movie. It only gets 4 minutes. I bet Betty White maybe has 5 minutes of screen time,
she's not
but it doesn't matter. No, she's not. She's a bit player. She's in, I think, 3 or 4 scenes, short scenes, but she's hilarious. Like, just laugh out loud hilarious. To be honest with you, I saw this movie when it came out, and I've seen it since then, but it's been a very long time. But I honestly was really not looking forward to revisiting it, except for Betty White. I could watch her scenes all day, every day. But I kind of had it in my mind that it was a really schlocky B-type movie. And I had it in my mind that it wasn't going to be good and that I was going to think it was stupid and I wasn't going to enjoy it, though I remembered enjoying it at the time. Going back and watching it, this is such an interesting movie to me.
Yes.
Because I feel like they took... Like, this seems like the creative process. Like, let's take one of the most obvious plots for a B movie. A giant crocodile somewhere where it's not supposed to be. Okay? That's it. Easy enough. Now, let's throw a lot of money and incredible talent at it and see what happens. Everybody involved in this has done great stuff. The director, Steve Miner, directed House, Warlock, Halloween H2O, Friday the 13th 2 and 3, and many other movies.
Yeah, not just horror.
Movies that I've really enjoyed. Oh, no, I only highlighted the horror ones, but lots of stuff. The writer, David E. Kelley, is a huge writer and producer in Hollywood and has been for decades. He wrote Doogie Howser, MD. He's had big success recently with Big Little Lies and 9 Perfect Strangers. He wrote for Ally McBeal. I mean,
creator, I think.
Yes, huge stuff. And then, like you already mentioned, big stars. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily like A-list blockbuster stars, but totally, these are people who were working, especially in the 90s. Bridget Fonda, off of the success of Single White Female, she was a big name for and Singles.
Well, Bill Pullman, not many years after Independence Day.
Right. Oliver Platt. God, even some of the smaller characters. There's a Deputy Sharon Gare, played by Meredith Salinger, who wasn't a huge star, but I had such a crush on her when I was a teenager because she was like the cute girl in one of the Corey's movies, Dream a Little Dream, which not a great movie, but I loved it, and I loved her in it.
Brendan Gleeson, who's you might know him as, was it Mad Eye Moody in the Harry Potter movies more recently, but he's been in a billion things.
Right. And Betty White. And so what you end up with is a pretty typical B monster movie, but it's well shot. I mean, it's really pretty to look at. Mm-hmm. It's well acted. If I had any complaint, and it's really not a complaint, but it's something that I feel like I need to at least mention, the movie is super witty. Like,
yeah, it's annoyingly witty at times.
Every line is a zinger.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And you know how I think the reason you bring it up is at times like that goes a little too far, right? You're just groaning and laughing and it takes you out of it a little bit. Like, you're watching a Hollywood movie.
Right. I mean, the lines are funny. There are great quotable lines.
Oh, yes.
But it's every line. Like, just every character is so witty and sharp and just so ready with a clever comeback at every turn. It's a little unrealistic, but whatever. I mean, I think, I don't remember if it was the writer or the director, one of them worked on Dawson's Creek, and that was a big criticism of Dawson's Creek, too, that those kids were far too sophisticated in the way that they talked and far too witty. And I see that here, but whatever. I mean, it's funny. It is a funny movie. And something that shocked me this time around, and reading about it, because I had never read about it before, there is some creature work done by Stan Winston. I mean, seriously, could you have gotten more talented people to work on this movie?
It's true.
But there's also a lot of CGI, which I had forgotten.
And it's good.
It looks better than a lot of the CGI today. What?
Yeah. It's crazy.
Like, it looks real most of the time.
They did a great job with the CGI. And at this time of the a lot of CGI looked like crap around this time, around this era. So it's true. Well, The Mummy came out the same year. Oh, God, man. So much came out this year.
Yeah.
This was the year of The Matrix and Fight Club and The Mummy and all this stuff. So it's kind of crazy what this movie was up against. But also, it kind of came in the wake of a bunch of movies that were similar to it. As I recall, like Anaconda, Deep Blue Sea, The Relic. This movie, I think, were all around the same time, where we were getting a little bit of these like monster movies. Were kind of Godzilla, that really crappy Godzilla.
Yeah,
I think came out this year or maybe the year before it. At the same time, I feel like this movie tonally is odd because you don't typically expect to see. It's gory. First of all, it's pretty gory, especially for a big budget Hollywood movie with all these stars in it. And at times it feels like a comedy because they're clever, witty things being said a lot. But then at times it feels like a straight-out horror movie and bloody and gory. And at other times it seems like an environmental tale or something. I mean, it just bounces back and forth so much between, sometimes in the same scene, between serious and comedy and adventure story and horror. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it makes it an interesting film, but it might have worked against it a little bit. It's just different from a lot of the other similar movies of that era, maybe with the exception of The Relic. I felt like it was trying to appeal to a lot of different audiences, and maybe it lost a few people along the way, because I don't think it was well reviewed at the time.
Lukewarm,
it did okay at the box office, but, I don't think it was, like you said, my memory of this film, and I did see it before, was that it was schlocky and silly, and I didn't have much memory of it. I thought that it was pretty not memorable. This time around, I felt, I got a little bored, and I think I thought it was a little silly at times and just a little too unrealistic at times for my mind. I mean, the bottom line is it's a big alligator in a lake. And the only reason this alligator is going to be a danger to you is if you get in the lake. If you're not in the lake, you're going to be fine. And it's this quiet lake that apparently not a lot of people go to. Just some scientists who are researching.
Right.
In this case, starting out, it's Brendan Gleeson's character, Sheriff Hank Keogh, and some researcher he's taken out there to check out beaver dams.
They're tagging beavers.
Tagging beavers, yeah, that's a joke, right?
Right.
And while he's on the boat, and this guy's in the diving, in the lake, tagging beavers. Now, one thing about diving in a lake is that it's hard to see. That you don't see very much in front of you. So that kind of works in this movie's advantage. But he's tagging beavers, and he's inside this beaver hut, and he gets pulled out of it by this unseen creature and dragged around. Sheriff sees all this happen, and then he gets to the boat and he pulls him out of the water, and it's pretty shocking. I mean, this is the first 5 minutes of the movie. He pulls half of his body out of the water. I mean, guts are dripping. He pulls into the boat. You see the whole thing. I was kind of shocked.
Me too, because I had forgotten.
Whew, yeah. And so, that kind of kicks things off. And then you jump to the Natural History Museum. Was that in New York City, I think?
I don't know, but Bridget Fonda works there. Her name is Kelley, and she gets immediately dumped by her boyfriend, and she finds out that one of her friends in a tiny bit part is Mariska Hargitay. Like, I'm watching this, I'm like, wait, is that Mariska Hargitay? Yeah, and she's in it for like 10 seconds.
Now, where would I know her from?
Criminal Minds, or one of those shows. She is the daughter of Jane Mansfield, I think.
Oh, no kidding.
And it's silly. Bridget Fonda's character is so silly. Like, she is this super uptight.
Yeah.
It's not a nice word, and it's not one that I throw around a lot, but bitch. Like, she's just like a cold,
Annoying as hell.
Yeah.
Which grated on me for a while. Maybe the whole movie. Like, I just don't think she's a very relatable, likable character. I'm not saying that she has to be, but I just wanted her to get eaten about halfway through it.
Well, they are setting her up. I mean, and I don't have a problem with this really. Like, she is so over the top in the beginning.
It's a caricature.
With the things that she says. It is a character. She plays it well. She's a good actress. She sells it. But they're setting her up for a character arc. And you can see it in every element of her character.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the movie, she wears very tight-fitting business attire. She has her hair pulled up really tight. Just like everything about her is tight. And as the movie progresses, and as she slowly kind of loosens up and comes into herself, she loses that edge. And you even see it visually. She starts wearing her hair down. She starts wearing far more comfortable clothes.
It's so transparent, though, and that's what annoyed me.
I'm afraid I can't let you go with us, ma'am.
Sheriff Keogh said I could.
Unfortunately, Fish and Game supersedes the sheriff.
Why do you have to supersede? Maybe I might be...
Ma'am, look, this isn't some kind of fact-finding expedition.
Yes, I know that.
It's not a science trip.
Could you be a little more condescending? Because I'm not real great with subtlety.
Something in that lake killed somebody, right? I appreciate you trying to help. I'm really glad that you brought the raid.
That's better.
Ma'am, it's not going to work.
If you call me ma'am one more time, I'll sue you. And with today's laws, it's possible.
She's good.
It's so written.
Yeah.
It's too Hollywood. And also, I didn't even think it was that believable. I didn't think her character... I really had a hard time finding that defining moment in the movie where suddenly she decided to stop being so bitchy. Figuratively and literally let her hair down. When was that? I don't remember.
She gets sent by her ex-boyfriend / boss because they found a tooth in that guy's body. And so because she's a paleontologist, she gets sent to look at the tooth. And she does, and she thinks it's reptilian, but she also views the body, and, the body's clearly been bitten in half. And so this has to be some kind of big predator. And so she kind of joins the investigation, and she and Hank are joined by Jack, played by Bill Pullman, who is a fish and game warden. Mm-hmm. And these three kind of become the central three, and then are joined by Oliver Platt's character in a while. But in the beginning, Bridget Fonda's introduction to Hank and Jack, she's condescending. She's, making jabs at their community, at their intelligence, about the locals. I mean, she's the city bitch, and they're the country folk,
It's true.
And they play that up. But as the movie progresses, and this isn't like super shoved in your face, but she and Jack Bill Pullman have these moments together where they talk, and they're obviously flirting. It's one of those, oh, we hate each other, but we're flirting. Like, it's stupid in Hollywood, but it's kind of funny. And I think that it's in those moments that you start to see a little bit more of the softer side of her. And at one point, they're talking, and he says to her, "You're having the best time of your life, aren't you?" And she says, "What? No, that's terrible. People are dying. How could I be?" Could you tell? and she actually says, that all of her life she's witnessed things from the outside, and this is the first time that she's ever felt a part of something. And to find a little bit of purpose and to feel like she's a part of something and to kind of be building some relationships, I think that softens her up a little bit. And it is silly. I mean, it is silly. It's such a big transformation. But honestly, by the end of the movie, I thought she was cute and like.
Well, if I were to rewrite it, if I would presume to rewrite this movie, I would from the beginning make her enthusiastic about this, but incredibly naive. Mm-hmm. She's a paleontologist who hates nature.
Yeah.
It's so weird, right? She gets out there, but she's bitching about mosquitoes and, I need to camp and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, come on. Really? I do not believe that whatsoever. I would have said, she should have jumped at the chance to get out there and be overeager, get in everybody's way, and also be a bit of a fish out of water, because even though she's enthusiastic for the job, she's never actually literally had that experience before. That's, I think, how I would have played it. Would have been a little more believable than what we ended up with, which I just thought was silly.
That's true, but that role is already filled by Oliver Platt. Oliver Platt plays this guy named Hector Sire. Mm-hmm. He is the
comes
one
out of nowhere.
who is. He comes out of nowhere. She knows who he is randomly because he's done some stuff with her museum or something, and he's this eccentric millionaire who's fascinated with crocodiles because he's a mythology professor. And she explains at some point that he thinks that crocodiles are divine, like gods. And of course the country boys, roll their eyes and thinks that's silly. And she's like, I know. It seems silly, but really historically, all of these different cultures from places in Asia to other parts of the world have, in some capacity, worshipped crocodiles or other large reptiles. She says that at some point, and I have no idea if this is true, but historically, crocodiles have been worshipped more than Jesus Christ. Now, I have no idea if that's true, but I do know that what she's saying about other cultures viewing these creatures as divine creatures, that is true. So he's the one who's overly enthusiastic, who is reckless in his pursuit. So I don't know.
He's super silly too, though. I mean, first of all,
God.
I don't know where he heard about this. Where did he hear about this? Do we ever get an explanation of why he suddenly swoops in on an airplane, lands in the middle of this lake, and then inserts himself into this situation?
No. He just found out about it somehow. And before anybody says crocodile, that's how they figure out that that's what it is, because he shows up and she's like, wait a second, he's super into crocodiles.
Good thing he's into crocodiles, right? He's part Steve Irwin, part Indiana Jones, part MacGyver, part wise ass. It's so over the top.
It is.
It was kind of silly. Again, it just felt really scripted and really annoying.
But as annoying as he is, and he is super annoying because he's super, super witty and very condescending.
And they put up with him for way too long.
Well, he and Sheriff Hank are set up as foils, and they're constantly taking jabs at one another and finding themselves in conflict. It's kind of cute. At the end, it kind of seems like they've developed kind of a love-hate kind of relationship.
He does know what he's talking about, so we're going to kind of let him hear anyway. And then, he's saved our ass a couple times. So.
Right, exactly. And I don't hate that. It's kind of cute and sweet. But, I mean, the whole movie really just comes down to they're looking for this crocodile. There are a couple of jokes that I just really want to highlight because they kill me every time. The first time that Kelley, Hank, and Jack go out on the lake together, they see something weird in the water and they pull up alongside it, and Hank pulls it up and it's like an elk head, and he swings it over and drops it in the boat right at Kelley's feet, and she screams and slaps him. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "You threw it at me." He's like, "I just put it down." And she's like, "No, you threw it at me." And she slaps him again. Oh, so funny. And then later, they are on another scouting expedition when a deputy's head, the crocodile jumps out of the water and just bites this guy's head off. And later they're walking around in the forest and she steps on a stick which launches this deputy's head at her. And I just died. She's like,
Just try keep breathing.
No, I am being very calm. I am composed. This is the second time I've been hit with a severed head, and it upsets me.
oh, just please. I don't know. I don't even know if other people will find that as funny as I did, but
Oh, it's funny.
she's just so high strung. It's hilarious.
I think actually Jack and Hank's character in this movie are pretty real. I felt like they were the two most real characters in this movie. They seem like just two guys who are got to do a job.
Yeah,
This is
they're
what
the
they have
straight men.
to do.
Mhm.
And I liked their dynamic from the very beginning. I liked the way they played it. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't ultra heroic or anything like that. They just seem like the guys who would be in my town who have these jobs, you know?
And they're just doing their job.
And they are. And they're just sort of tolerating all these crazy people who are jumping in here, who are more or less getting in the way of them doing their job. And so, like, the other kind of ridiculous thing about it is, why do they continue to tolerate it for so long when they have the authority to just boot these people out, you know?
Well, they even talk about it. I mean, it's both of them hate Hector, but Kelley keeps saying, "Look, he knows what he's doing.
He's setting traps for us." And
Yeah, I mean, he's a great trapper. He knows how to find them. Like, yes, he's eccentric and crazy, but he's got all this high-tech equipment that they can use. So, as annoying as he is of some use to them.
yeah, I would say so. He's like the most used to them. I mean, they're pretty
Right.
freaking lucky he randomly landed there because he's got everything.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he's got the stuff and he's got the knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah.
But before he even shows up, they're not really worried about it. They want to keep it really quiet. But the reason that they're not panicked immediately is because this lake is apparently so remote that nobody lives on it, and really nobody does anything on it. There's just this one old couple that lives on it. And so the main three folks, go to visit this couple, and when they get there, it's Betty White, and her name is Mrs. Dolores
Bickerman.
And she says her husband died.
Oh, my husband passed away. It's been almost 2 years now.
My department doesn't have any record of that, Mrs. Bickerman.
Well, I'm sorry. Incomplete records haunt me so.
In just such a
good.
sarcastic way.
yeah.
He was very sick, and he refused to go to a doctor. He'd be coherent one day and incoherent the next. And, well, one coherent day, he asked me to end his suffering. He kept insisting, and well, finally, I just gave in. And I hit him on the head with a skillet, and then buried him under the bulkhead. Well, dig him up if you don't believe me, Sherlock.
Oh, just everything she says is hilarious, and it's only because of her delivery. I suppose another performer could have played the role and it would have been funny, but it's just such a hilarious juxtaposition to what we expected of her at the time, and it works so well.
It's a character that, just gets more and more quirky and mysterious the more you see her, right? Because she's saying these kind of outrageous things, but she's walking around and handing them tea. She's openly admitting to killing and burying her husband. It's just a juxtaposition that makes her very, very interesting.
And her demeanor is, very grandmotherly, like she's like you said, giving them tea, giving them cookies, and she does this throughout. But later, as she gets more irritated, the things that come out of her mouth are it's just so unexpected that it just lands so funny. But then Hector shows up, and the four now, Kelley, Hector, Jack, and Hank, go out on canoes. One of their boats gets flipped by something underneath them, and Kelley and Hank end up in the water. And there are several of these scenes where something like that happens, and then there's really no payoff.
Yeah, nobody dies.
No, it didn't really bother me. I still found it suspenseful, and I didn't need an attack every 5 minutes. Like, they're figuring out, obviously there's something big in the water. Deputy Sharon, Meredith Salinger, finds a toe, and Hector holds it up to Hank and says,
Is this the man who was killed? He seemed taller.
That was so funny, okay? That was hilarious.
There's that joke. There's another joke because they start to, once they realize that there is a crocodile, they wonder where it came from. And I don't remember who, maybe Hector says some asshole in Asia must have flushed it down the toilet. There are a couple of gags that are direct nods to the film Alligator, which we've done. Mm-hmm. And this is really not all that unlike. It's just bigger budget.
Bigger budget. And it happens, in Alligator, I feel like the stakes were higher simply because that thing was going through and terrorizing people in town. Also, kind of unrealistically, suddenly shows up at a garden party, suddenly shows up in an alley in downtown. But yeah, that was a little different. I thought the stakes were higher there.
Yeah. But Hector throws a big party at the campsite because crocodiles are attracted to noise, and he's dancing with that deputy that I've mentioned, and he says,
Law enforcement is very dangerous work, isn't it? And you have such big, wonderful boobs.
And he gets away with saying this stuff. Like, she laughs like it's funny. Like, he's just that eccentric. And I actually think she's kind of into him.
Oh, she's definitely into him. Again, improbably so, but yes.
It's cute. But eventually, they dive in the water. They realize it's a croc. The big reveal is when Hector and Hank get into a fight, and Hank chases Hector, and the rest of the main characters follow the pursuit, and they end up near the shore of the lake when suddenly an enormous bear appears and is like standing and roaring and threatening to attack, and the crocodile leaps out of the water and grabs the bear and drags it into the lake. All CGI, looks totally real.
Looks
fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's when they know.
It really looks good. It's hard to believe they did a mix of animatronic and CGI because you can hardly tell one from the other.
Yep.
It's seamless. This was the other thing, though, that bothered me about the movie. It's a crocodile is also a land creature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there should theoretically be just as in peril on the land as they are in sea. They are camped like 6 feet away from the edge of the lake. Platt's putting some traps around and stuff like that, but it's just like whenever they're attacked in the lake, it's like, oh, they get out of the lake, and then they're out of the lake, and now everything's fine again, and they can just kind of stand around and talk and regroup and do their thing and sleep some more and wake up. I didn't feel this impending sense like, oh my God, like there's this danger that, they could at any moment just sort of walk away and then nobody'd really have to worry about it,
Well, right. They talk about it, but not until the very end is there really any kind of confrontation on land. Hector explains that crocodiles are more dangerous on land. That underwater they don't see as well. They can still get you, but
my God, this thing tacks like underwater all the time.
Right. At this point, they just happen to randomly be near Betty White's house, and they see her lead a cow to the shore, and the croc is just waiting in the water with its head above water, its jaws wide open, and it eats the cow. And they go and they talk to her, and she confesses that she's been feeding it for like 6 years. And Hank says something to her like, so your husband, you didn't happen to lead him down to the water, did you? And she looks at him and says,
If I had a dick, this is where I'd tell you to suck it.
I could watch that line on a loop for hours. Like, just Betty White saying that. She's so serious. She's so angry, and just she's just little old sweet Betty White. Just my God. And then she calls him Officer Fuckmeat. Oh, too hilarious.
Well, didn't it beg the question, though? Weren't you kind of wondering how many cows does she have and how often does she need to feed it?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
This is one, I mean, it's a big crocodile, but even for a big animal, it is one hungry animal.
Oh,
I mean,
right. It just ate a bear like a minute before.
The next day goes and eats a cow. Like, when's this thing going to go away for a while?
Hector goes swimming with it because that's what he does. He swims with these crocodiles, but it comes up right behind him. And I would guess that this was the animatronic, and it was big, and it looked really good. And I guess they said, it just they designed it using hydraulics, and they sealed it really tight so that the water wouldn't corrupt it in any way. And I guess it just worked. It was kind of the opposite of Bruce from Jaws that they just had such problems with. Like, this thing just worked. It even could like swim on its own.
Yeah.
They didn't have it doing that very often because it was really slow. They would pull it along with a boat, but it could articulate its movement in such a way that it could actually propel itself forward. But he swims with it, and he comes eye to eye with it, and he says, this one's different. It's not like any of the others that I've ever seen. And he barely escapes. The crocodile attacks his helicopter, which again does not look bad. Mm-hmm. But this is where it kind of culminates. What are we going to do? And Hector says to Kelley, we can't let them kill it. And so Hector and Kelley try to convince Hank and Jack that they can't kill it. They've got to try to trap it. U.S. wildlife is coming, but Hector says it's too big. They won't even try. They'll just kill it. Everything he says makes sense. He's like, it's a miracle. There's no explanation for why it should be here. It's 150 years old. It may have crossed an ocean to get here. How can we destroy something like that? We've at least got to try. He lays out a plan. We'll lure it to the land. I've got a net that's not strong enough to hold it, but strong enough to hold it long enough for the drugs to kick in. We can trank it, and the drugs will kick in. And he's like, I know like an oil truck or something that can house it for the time being until we find out where to put it. And they convince the very, very reluctant Hank and Jack to try this plan. And that's what they do. And so they commandeer one of Betty White's cows. Put it in a sling.
They go fishing with a cow.
Hoist it up in a helicopter.
It's so silly. It's so silly.
It's silly and like, honestly, I was when they start dipping it in the water, I was like, oh, that poor cow.
I know. I thought the same thing. There's like a PETA thing at the end that says no animals were harmed, but I'll bet that cow was a little pissed.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if they actually dipped it in the water. I do know that they did hoist a cow up on a crane.
Oh, that's definitely a real cow. I mean, they weren't like
real.
bothering to CGI this cow, right?
It looks real.
Poor cow.
And it takes a long time. The cow gets tired. I mean, it starts in daylight, and then we cut to nighttime.
It ends at night.
And she, the cow gets tired. It's not really moving around. Bridget Fonda says she looks like a giant tea bag. But then the crocodile does start coming. They have a big showdown. Hector with the cow leads it to the shore. Something goes wrong, and he loses control of the helicopter, drops the poor cow in the lake. They make a point of showing you that the cow is okay later. Like, it just walks across the screen. The helicopter crashes into the lake. The croc comes on shore for a little bit, and Bill Pullman's able to get a shot into its belly, a dart. But that doesn't take it down immediately, and it knocks Bridget Fonda into the water. And there's actually a really good underwater scene where she's swimming away from it. This is the second. There was an underwater scene in the very beginning, too, and they did a really good job with it. Now, lakes are very murky, so I don't know how they filmed this, because
I would love to know.
There's great visibility under the water.
It could have been in a tank, in Hollywood or something. They just murked up the water a bit. But, you and I are both fans of underwater photography, and I thought this movie did a fantastic job of underwater photography.
And the crocodile chases her. She kind of hides behind a tree, and it swims past, but then she realizes her foot is stuck, and as she's trying to get it unstuck, she looks up, and the croc is coming right at her, and it turns on its side and opens its jaws. Luckily, she's behind the tree, so that prevents it from getting her, and she gets out and gets to the helicopter where Hector still is, and then the crocodile attacks, but it attacks through the helicopter, so they're able to jump off and swim to shore, and the crocodile is trapped in the helicopter. And the law enforcement people, Hank and Jack, want to shoot it, but Hector and Kelley plead with them. They say, look, it's trapped. And then the drugs start to kick in, and it starts to become sedate. Mm-hmm. And so they don't. You think Bill Pullman's going to shoot it, but really what he has grabbed is another tranq gun. Mm-hmm. And so he just shoots it with another tranquilizer, which is very smart. And so you think it's all over. And then a second giant crocodile jumps out of the lake and attacks them. Hank just blows its head off with his giant gun. It's pretty funny. The crocodile did chase them around on land a little bit too. It chased the trucks. That was exciting. Good stuff going on there. Finally, of course, at the last minute, once everything is taken care of, U.S. Wildlife shows up, and they take over, dealing with the crocodile or whatever. Hank goes with Hector in the ambulance because, they're friends now. And Kelley and Jack have a moment, and it looks like they're going to just part ways without, acknowledging that they have feelings for one another. But then she breaks the ice and is like, doesn't anybody in Maine ever make a move? And they drive off together, and it's sweet, and they have a little banter. It's cute. And then the end of the movie is you see Betty White in the middle of the day. There's this cute music. She's walking down the dock on her property, and she sits down and she dips her toes in the water, and she's looking out over the water, and she starts throwing in breadcrumbs, and you hear her say, "That's right, come to mama, nibble mama's toes." And these little baby crocodiles are in there, and she's just feeding them gleefully, and then you see the big croc on a flatbed truck going down the freeway, which is a pretty hilarious image, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And I raced through the end because we were running low on time, but it feels like it goes that fast. Yes, there is a lot of witty banter. There are things happening, but the gist of it is they're after the crocodile. They find it. They trap it. It's not a complex movie.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I think the thing that I just look, it's fun. It's fun enough. It was quirky. Like I said, it made me roll my eyes a lot. I thought it was kind of unrealistic. It's not really the type of movie I would choose to watch because I want it to be a little more exciting, a little more action-packed like that. There are these action scenes, but I just think, kind of like I said, in the back of my head, the stakes were really not that high. And as often in the case in something like this, they're more putting themselves in peril than they're finding themselves in peril. There's really not much of a moment where, they're cornered and they're trapped and like the raft in Creepshow 2, right? Like that kind of thing where it's a countdown to death. It's like, oh, we went out on the water looking for this croc, but a couple of us fell in, so now we got to get back out of the water and back to land, which happens 2 or 3 times. And then, at the end of the day, they can take as much time as they want and pull in as much resources as they want to get this alligator. Because it's not like he's holding anybody hostage.
Right.
So, I just kind of was a little bit like, all right. About halfway through the movie, I just wanted to see the plot unfold and finish.
I get it.
I'm not dogging it because it had a lot of funny moments and fun things like we said. The actors are, of course, fantastic actors. The dialogue's witty and funny, and there's some funny moments. Still pretty uneven. At times it was really gory and scary, and other times it was just a bunch of people just being witty to each other, a lot of comedy, and then it ends up...
Romantic comedy.
Oh, my God. It's so cliche, in almost every way. Almost all these characters, like we said, are stereotypical. So it didn't really bring anything new to the table in that regard. But good effects, fun to see Betty White. That's why we're doing it. And yeah, I was really happy. I never actually seen this from beginning to end. And so most of the times I've seen this, I totally missed her role. I didn't even realize she was in this until you told me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a good watch. It was fun to see. Would I recommend it to somebody else? Not really, unless you want to go in and this is exactly the kind of movie you like.
Yes, that exactly. But I would recommend it, but I would recommend it more on the merits of the comedy than the horror.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a funny movie, and I think that's what they're going for. I think they're going for kind of schlocky. I think that it's perfectly successful as a modern-day B-movie. Something like Mosquito or Alligator or whatever,
I can see that.
It gives you a giant crocodile. It gives you some scary moments, but it's also intentionally funny. So I think it works. It's not amazing. I don't think it's a great movie, but I do think it's a really well done bad movie.
Yeah.
I like it. And, again, if nothing else, you know what, folks, if you don't want to watch this movie, I bet money you could find just Betty White's scenes on YouTube.
On YouTube.
And that is worth your time. I guarantee it. Especially if you're a Betty White fan, as you very much should be. And so, with all sincerity, we do this to pay tribute to and to honor people who we've lost, and this is no different, but really I think that my heart is more in this than any other tribute we've done before. I think that Betty White is deserving of all of the praise that she gets. Her legacy is cemented, I think, in Hollywood and in our hearts with all the respect that I have. Oh, God. I just want to thank her for being a friend.
Oh,
no,
ching.
seriously, I will miss her. It was just kind of, even during the pandemic, she totally isolated herself wisely. And so she hadn't really been seen publicly in a couple of years. She stayed in her very modest home and just kind of holed herself up. But it was always just kind of nice knowing that she was out there.
Yeah.
And it's sad that she's not, but she will be forever remembered.
Amen.
Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode, let us know. If you have any insight into this movie that we missed, we'd love to hear it. If you want to hear our other stuff, all you need to do is Google Two Guys and a Chainsaw podcast, and you'll find us all over the place. Anywhere where you can find streaming podcasts, you'll find us there. We'll be back, but until that time, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.